She thought my warnings were a joke. A friendly suggestion. Flash of a pristine, sparkling pool. She saw my fence as an invitation, not a boundary. Quick cut to a woman, Karen, smirking as she climbs a fence. For weeks, she'd been like a vulture circling, her entitlement a suffocating shadow over my home. Close up on a man's face, his eyes cold with a chilling calm. She wanted my pool. She craved it. And today, she took it. Sudden, jarring silence. Then, a blood-curdling scream that morphs into a gurgle. The screen cuts to the pool, no longer pristine. The water is a swirling, unnatural, vibrant blue. Karen's head breaks the surface, her skin stained the same shocking color. Her eyes are wide with terror. Now, she's drowning in her own desires. And the blue. That's just the beginning. For the next 3 days, she will wear her transgression like a second skin. The air in the immaculate, temperature-controlled home was thick with a silence that felt both sacred and fragile. David traced the rim of his whiskey glass, the condensation. A cool kiss against his fingertips. Outside, the world was a furnace, the late afternoon sun a merciless tyrant scorching the manicured lawns of the quiet, affluent cul-de-sac. His sanctuary, his fortress of solitude, was a testament to a life of relentless ambition and carefully curated success. At its heart, his pool, a shimmering expanse of turquoise, a slice of the Caribbean carved into the suburban landscape. It was more than a luxury, it was a symbol. A moat separating his world of order and control from the chaos that lay beyond his 6-foot privacy fence. And then there was Karen. Karen, his next-door neighbor, was a woman who navigated the world with the unshakable conviction that it owed her something. Or, more specifically, that he owed her something. Her campaign had begun subtly, with overly sweet smiles and offers of dry, tasteless muffins. Then came the passive-aggressive jabs, her voice a sharp whine carrying over the fence. Must be nice, she'd call out, her voice dripping with faux admiration, to have all that just for yourself. My kids, they just love the water. It's a shame, really. David had been polite but firm. His home was his refuge, not a community center. His refusal had been a declaration of war. The past few weeks had been a slow-burning siege. Karen's 2 sons, energetic and undisciplined, had taken to playing right against the fence, their soccer ball a rhythmic, maddening thump-thump-thump against the wood. He'd seen their small faces peering through the cracks, their whispers like the rustling of vermin in the walls. Karen herself had taken to sunbathing in a lurid pink bikini, her body angled directly towards his pool, a silent, fleshy protest. But today, she had crossed the line. He'd come home early, a rare reprieve from the relentless demands of his tech company. The promise of a quiet swim, of the cool water washing away the day's stress, had been a beacon of light. He'd stepped onto his patio, a cold beer in hand, and the scene that greeted him had ignited a rage so pure, so incandescent, it had momentarily stolen his breath. There she was. Karen. In his pool. On his expensive, inflatable lounger. Her eyes were closed, a smug smile plastered on her face, as if she were the Queen of Sheba, and this her royal bath. Her sons, shrieking with glee, were cannonballing into the shallow end, their boisterous chaos shattering the sanctity of his peace. The audacity of it was breathtaking. It was a violation so profound, so personal, that it bypassed all rational thought and plunged straight into the primal core of his being. This was his home. His fortress. And it had been breached. A strange, chilling calm descended upon him. It was the same icy focus he brought to a hostile boardroom takeover, the same detached clarity that had made him a formidable force in his industry. He had warned her. He had been reasonable. Now, reason had left the building. He turned and walked back into the house, his movements unnervingly precise. He went to his home lab, a sterile, white room that was his private kingdom of creation and innovation. On a stainless steel shelf, among beakers and vials, was a small, unassuming bottle containing a clear, viscous liquid. It was a project he'd been toying with in his spare time, a bioreactive, non-toxic dye. It was designed to bond with the proteins in human skin, creating a vibrant, temporary pigment that was impervious to soap and water. Its most unique feature was its programmed, time-release degradation. After exactly 72 hours, it would simply vanish, leaving no trace. He had tested it, of course. A small, blue patch on his own thigh had bloomed and then disappeared, just as predicted. Perfectly harmless. and perfectly, diabolically, appropriate, with the vial concealed in his hand. He returned to the patio. Karen, in her sun-drenched arrogance, remained oblivious. He moved to the pool's filtration system, a complex heart of pipes and valves he knew intimately. With the practiced ease of a surgeon, he opened a port and, with a soft, satisfying glug, emptired the vial's contents into the circulation system. The transformation was immediate and mesmerizing. From the return jets, tendrils of the most vibrant, electric blue began to unfurl, swirling and dancing through the turquoise water like an alien bloom. The pool, his pristine oasis, was becoming a work of art, a swirling masterpiece of righteous indignation. Karen, finally sensing the change in her illicit paradise, sat up. She slipped off her oversized sunglasses, her brow furrowed in confusion. What in the world? A piercing scream from the shallow end cut her off. Her older son was staring at his hands as if they were alien appendages. They were no longer the pale, grubby hands of a 10-year-old boy. They were blue. A deep, impossible, cartoonish blue. With a cry of alarm, Karen slid off the lounger into the now indigo water. What's happening? She shrieked, her eyes darting around wildly until they landed on David, who stood on the patio, a silent, grim-faced sentinel. I believe the term is trespassing, he said, his voice as cold and clear as the ice in his whiskey glass. Raw, primal panic erupted. Karen looked down at her own arms, her legs. The vibrant blue was clinging to her skin like a second, synthetic skin. It's not washing off, she cried, her voice cracking, as she scrubbed at her arm in a frantic, futile gesture. The color held fast, a defiant badge of her transgression. Her sons, now both wailing, scrambled out of the pool, their small, blue bodies dripping onto the immaculate white stone of the patio. They looked like creatures from a fever dream, too. Small, terrified smurfs in a world that had suddenly turned hostile. You're a monster. Karen screamed, her face a contorted mask of fury and dawning horror, now tinged with an ethereal, deepening azure. I'm calling the police. An excellent idea, David replied, holding up his own phone. He'd already made the call. The security cameras, always recording, had captured everything. The illegal entry. The unauthorized use of his property. The whole sordid affair. The distant, rising wail of sirens was the soundtrack to Karen's downfall. She stood there, dripping blue, her children's sobs a pathetic chorus at her feet. The smugness was gone, replaced by the chilling realization that she had picked a fight with the wrong man. She had pushed, and he had pushed back, not with anger, but with cold, calculated, scientific precision. As the first patrol car rounded the corner, David allowed himself a small, tight smile. This wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. For Karen. The next 3 days would be a public spectacle of her own making, a walking, talking billboard of her own arrogance. And as the officers stepped out of their car, their eyes widening in disbelief at the scene before them, David knew one thing. With absolute certainty, justice, like his new dye, came in many shades. And today, it was a brilliant, inescapable blue. The two officers, a veteran named Miller with weary, seen-it-all eyes, and a younger, sharper-looking woman named Chen, stood at the edge of the patio, their expressions a masterclass in forced neutrality. The scene before them was something out of a bizarre, low-budget science fiction movie. The swirling, electric blue pool. The two sobbing, sapphire-hued children. And Karen, her skin a deepening shade of cobalt, her voice a shrill, hysterical screech that grated on the humid evening air. He poisoned us, she shrieked, pointing a trembling, blue-stained finger at David. Look at us. This is some kind of chemical attack. Arrest him. David remained preternaturally calm, a rock of composure in her sea of hysterics. He took a deliberate sip of his whiskey, the ice clinking softly in the glass. Officers, he began, his voice level and reasonable, this woman and her children illegally entered my property. They were swimming in my pool without my permission. I have it all on video, from multiple angles. Miller's gaze shifted from Karen to David. And they are blue, sir. Ah, yes, David said, as if discussing the weather. A new, state-of-the-art water purification system I'm beta testing. It utilizes a biointegrating, non-toxic dye to visually confirm purity levels. It's designed to be completely harmless, though it does have a rather vibrant temporary effect on skin contact. It's programmed to biodegrade in exactly 72 hours. He paused, letting the technical jargon hang in the air. I have the full safety data sheet from the lab, if you'd like to see it. It's as safe as food coloring. Chen, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. She said, her voice firm but not unkind, did you climb the fence to enter this property? Karen's tirade faltered. Her eyes darted back and forth. He's been taunting us with this pool for months. It's a heat wave. My children were suffering. Any decent person would have offered. That's not what I asked, Chen pressed, her pen poised over her notepad. Did you or did you not cross the fence onto Mr. Henderson's property without his consent? The silence was damning. Karen's shoulders slumped, her rage momentarily deflating into a wretched pout. Her youngest son, overwhelmed by the entire ordeal, buried his blue face into her blue leg, his sobs muffled and pathetic, Miller sighed, the sound heavy with the weight of 1,000 domestic disputes. Based on the evidence and your own admission, I'm issuing you a citation for criminal trespassing. He tore a slip from his book and handed it to her. As for the blue, as long as the substance is non-toxic as Mr. Henderson claims, there's no criminal act. It's a civil matter. A civil matter. Karen sputtered, her voice rising again. Look at me. I'm a freak. You're a trespasser, David corrected her, his voice devoid of any emotion. The rest is simply a consequence. The walk back to her own house, a mere 50 feet away, was the longest journey of Karen's life. It was a walk of shame on a biblical scale. With Officer Miller's stern warning to not interact with your neighbor further ringing in her ears, she herded her 2 weeping, blue children across the lawn. She could feel David's eyes on her back, a cold, victorious gaze. Worse, she saw the curtains twitch in the window of the house across the street. Mrs. Gable, the neighborhood's chief gossip, was watching. The humiliation was a physical sensation. A hot flush of shame that burned beneath her new, cool-toned skin, she fumbled with her back door, her hands shaking, and stumbled into the cool, air-conditioned normalcy of her own kitchen. And then she saw him. Her husband, Rick, was standing by the island, loosening his tie, a briefcase on the floor beside him. He was a man who prized order and appearances, a mid-level executive at an insurance firm who believed a tidy lawn and a quiet life were the cornerstones of success. He looked up, a tired smile on his face, ready to complain about traffic. The smile evaporated. His jaw went slack. His eyes widened, first in disbelief, then in a horror so profound it seemed to suck the air from the room. He stared at his wife, a blue-hued harpy, and his 2 sons, who looked like tragic, tear-streaked characters from a children's movie. What the hell happened? Rick whispered, each with a small, choked puff of air, and the story came pouring out of Karen, a torrent of self-pity, righteous indignation, and carefully edited facts. She was the victim, David the deranged villain. She'd only wanted to cool the kids off. He'd trapped them, poisoned them, humiliated them. Rick listened, his face slowly turning from shock to a deep, crimson rage that clashed violently with Karen's cobalt blue. He wasn't looking at her, but at his sons, who had huddled together on the floor, their blue fingers leaving faint smudges on the pristine oak. Let me get this straight, he said, his voice dangerously low. You, after I specifically told you to leave the man alone, climbed his fence and took the boys into his pool. He shouldn't have it if he's not going to share. Karen defended, her voice taking on a petulant whine. It's about principle, Rick. Principle. Rick exploded, his voice a sudden roar that made the boys jump. Principle. Look at you. Look at our sons. You think this is about principle? This is about your goddamn entitlement. It's always about what you think you deserve. A better car. A bigger house, your neighbor's swimming pool. Did it ever occur to you to just follow the damn rules? He stormed past her and wrenched on the kitchen faucet, grabbing their older son, Leo, by the arm. He began scrubbing at the boy's skin with a dish sponge and a furious squirt of soap. The blue remained, mocking him, a permanent stain of his wife's folly. Leo cried out, more from fear of his father's rage than from the rough scrubbing hits. Not coming off, Dad, the boy whimpered. Rick let go, his shoulders slumping in defeat. He stared at his hand, now stained with a faint blue residue from the water. He looked at his family, his perfect suburban dream turned into a sideshow act. What did he say this was? He asked, his voice now hollow. Some biodye, Karen mumbled. He said. 72 hours. 72 hours, Rick repeated, the words tasting like ash. 3 days. I have a regional conference on Monday. Our family portrait is next Saturday. What am I supposed to do, Karen? Take my Smurf family to meet my boss. Tell him my wife is a kleptomaniac who steals swims. The argument raged for an hour, a storm of accusations and recriminations that laid bare the deep, foundational cracks in their marriage. It was a tapestry of every other fight they'd ever had, every other time Karen's lack of boundaries had created a mess that Rick had to clean up. Meanwhile, next door, David methodically restored his sanctuary. He engaged the pool's high-power cleaning cycle, watching as the vibrant blue slowly filtered out, the water returning to its original, pristine turquoise. He wiped down the patio, erasing the small, blue footprints, a physical act of erasing Karen's violation. His security system was uploading the footage to a secure cloud server. His lawyer was on standby. He stood at his study window, which offered a clear, unobstructed view of Karen and Rick's backyard. He watched them through the glass, a silent observer to the drama he had authored. He saw Rick scrubbing his son's arm. He saw Karen's frantic, theatrical gestures. He felt a grim, chilling satisfaction. It was not joy. It was the quiet, profound pleasure of a complex equation being solved, of a system returning to equilibrium. She had introduced chaos into his world of order. He had simply turned that chaos back on her, amplified and inescapable. Back in the blue house, a fragile, exhausted truce had settled. Rick was on the phone, trying to find a dermatologist who would see them on a Friday night. Karen, having failed to remove the color with soap, lemon juice, and rubbing alcohol, was now mindlessly scrolling through her phone, seeking a distraction in the digital world. She opened the community Facebook group, a place usually filled with posts about lust, cats, and recommendations for plumbers. And there it was. A new post, from just 20 minutes ago. It was from Martha Gable, the nosy neighbor from across the street. The post contained a single photo, taken from an upstairs window, blurry but unmistakable. It showed a blue woman and 2 small, blue children being escorted off a property by a police officer. The caption read, "Well, this is a new one for Maple Creek. Looks like the Henderson pool party got a little wild. Anyone know why they are blue? Hashtag neighborhood watch, hashtag blue man group auditions, hashtag trespassing." The comments were already flooding in. OMG, is that Karen Miller? I thought they were on vacation. My kid is in Leo's summer camp. Is this contagious? Serves her right. She's been eyeing that pool since he put it in. Someone call the news. This is hilarious. Karen's breath hitched. The phone slipped from her blue fingers and clattered onto the floor. The screen glowed up at her, a portal to her own public crucifixion. It wasn't just a citation. It wasn't just a 3-day ordeal. It was a post. It was a hashtag. It was a permanent, digital monument to her humiliation. She was no longer just Karen, the aggrieved neighbor. She was a meme. A joke. The blue woman of Maple Creek. The color on her skin felt suddenly hotter, a brand seared into her very soul. The 72-hour sentence had just become a lifetime of infamy. The clatter of the phone on the oak floor was like the sound of a gavel, an official pronouncement of social death. Karen stared at the glowing screen, at the mocking words and laughing emojis, and something inside her fractured. The initial shock and horror curdled into a venomous, white-hot rage. They were laughing at her. Her. Martha Gable, with her overgrown petunias, and her husband who wore socks with sandals, was laughing. The entire neighborhood, the world, was pointing and laughing. "Rick," she whispered, the sound raw and strangled. "Rick, look." Rick, who had been staring blankly at the wall, contemplating the smoldering wreckage of his immediate future, snatched the phone from the floor. His eyes scanned the post, his face, already flushed with anger, darkening to a shade of deep maroon. The muscles in his jaw bunched into hard knots. "She took a picture," he breathed, his voice a low growl of disbelief. "That woman took a picture of my family and put it on the internet." As if on cue, his own phone, sitting on the granite countertop, began to buzz incessantly. A relentless cascade of notifications. Texts from his golf buddies. An alert from His sister in Oregon. A notification from the parents' group chat for his younger son's t-ball team. The digital walls were closing in, the whispers of the neighborhood amplified into a deafening global roar. Rick's fury, which had been a focused laser beam on Karen, now exploded outward, a shotgun blast of impotent rage at the world. He wanted to storm over to Martha Gable's house, to smash her phone, to scream at the faceless mob online. But what could he do? He was trapped, a prisoner in his own home, branded by his wife's folly. This is a nightmare, he said, slumping into a kitchen chair. He buried his face in his hands, then recoiled slightly as the cool, blue skin of his fingers touched his forehead. There was no escaping it. This is the end of us here. We'll have to move. No. Karen snapped, her paralysis breaking. A new, defiant energy surged through her. We are not going to be run out of our own home. He did this to us. Rick? That psychopath next door. He planned this. This is assault. This is psychological terrorism. She began pacing the kitchen, her blue feet slapping against the tile, her mind racing. She would fight back. She would sue him into oblivion. She would tell the world what a monster he was, how he'd maliciously poisoned her and her children. The narrative in her head was already taking shape, a grand, sweeping epic of victimhood and vindication. Next door, in the serene quiet of his study, David Henderson was also looking at Martha Gable's Facebook post. He analyzed it with the same dispassionate eye he would use on a competitor's flawed source code. The post was amateurish, the photo blurry. The comments were a predictable mix of mockery and suburban pearl-clutching. But it was a data breach, a leak in the controlled environment he had created. The narrative was escaping his grasp. He picked up his phone and dialed his lawyer, a sharp, merciless man named Marcus Thorne who specialized in corporate litigation and reputation management. Marcus, David said, his voice calm. We have a situation. It's escalating. He quickly and efficiently detailed the events, from the trespassing to the die to the now viral Facebook post. Marcus listened without interruption. When David was finished, there was a brief pause. David, your neighbor is hysterical and, from the sound of it, deeply stupid. That makes her unpredictable. She's going to paint you as a monster, a mad scientist who tortures children. The media, especially the local vultures, will eat that up. We need to get ahead of it. Now. What do you suggest? David asked, a full frontal assault. Of the legal and public relations variety, Marcus replied, a certain predatory glee in his voice. You have the video footage of her breaking and entering. Crystal clear. 4K resolution. Perfect. You have the chemical safety data sheet. Of course. Excellent, Marcus said. Send them to me. I'm going to draft a statement. We won't give it to the hyenas directly. We'll release it through official channels. We'll control the story by making you the reasonable party and her the unhinged criminal she is. We'll also leak a choice clip of the video. The one of her climbing the fence should suffice. Let people see who the aggressor is. Within the hour, David had emailed the files to his lawyer. He felt the familiar thrill of taking decisive action, of bending a chaotic situation to his will. He was no longer just the man who had turned his neighbor blue, he was a protagonist. Seizing control of his own story, the first night was an eternity of surreal misery for the Blue family. The pristine white sheets of their beds were quickly stained with faint, ghostly blue smudges. Rick retreated to the guest room, the silence between him and Karen a chasm wider than the lawn that separated their house from David's. Karen lay awake, her skin feeling tight and alien, her mind replaying the Facebook comments on an endless, torturous loop. In their room, the boys slept fitfully, whispering to each other in the dark. Leo, the older son, had seen his mother's phone. He'd seen the picture. He'd seen the laughing emojis. A hot, confusing shame, a feeling he'd never known before, began to take root in his 10-year-old heart. Morning came not with the gentle promise of a new day, but with the harsh glare of a world that knew their secret. They woke up, looked at their hands, at each other, and the grim reality crashed down on them anew. They were still blue, and the world was at their door. A news van from a local affiliate was parked across the street, its satellite dish pointed at their house like a weapon. A reporter, a young woman with aggressively white teeth and a microphone, was standing on the sidewalk, speaking to the camera. The siege had begun. Rick's phone rang. It was his boss, a man named Bill who valued discretion and a drama-free workplace above all else. Rick, Bill said, his voice strained. My wife saw something on Facebook last night. I thought it was a joke. I just saw the morning news. What the hell is going on? Rick, his voice hoarse, tried to explain. But the words sounded insane even to his own ears. My neighbor, a dispute, there's a die in the water. Rick, I don't care about the details, Bill cut in, his voice cold. What I care about is that my top regional salesman is the star of a freak show. The conference on Monday. You can't come. Not like this. Stay home. We'll talk next week. The line went dead. Rick stared at the phone, his hand trembling. His career, his livelihood, was now hanging by a thread. The consequences were no longer social. They were financial. Catastrophic, fueled by a fresh wave of desperation, Karen frantically searched for a lawyer. She found a personal injury attorney, a man whose face was plastered on the side of a bus bench, and explained her case, her voice filled with the righteous fury of the wronged. The lawyer listened patiently before asking the questions she didn't want to answer. So, you admit you were on his property without permission? He provoked me. Is there any medical report? A doctor's diagnosis of injury? A rash, a burn, any actual physical harm? The harm is psychological. And I'm blue. Right. The lawyer said slowly, the skepticism evident even over the phone. This is an unusual case. Your trespassing severely undermines any claim of injury. And without proof of toxicity, assault with a chemical is a very, very high bar to clear. Especially against a man who, I assume, has significant resources to fight this. Her last hope for a swift, legal revenge was crumbling. Powerless. Trapped and publicly shamed, Karen and Rick could do nothing but turn on the television, morbidly drawn to the story of their own demise. They watched the local news, their faces grim. The reporter was rehashing the story, calling them the Blue family of Maple Creek. While the Miller family claims they were the victims of a malicious attack, the reporter said, her face a mask of journalistic sincerity, we've just received an official statement from Mr. David Henderson's legal counsel. The screen cut to a graphic displaying the logo of a high-powered law firm. The anchor began to read the statement aloud, words like repeated warnings, unlawful entry, and documented harassment cutting through the air, and then, it happened, Mr. Henderson's attorney has also provided us with a short clip from a home security system, the anchor announced. The screen flickered, and there it was. Crystal clear 4K footage of Karen, her face set in a look of smug determination, hooking her fingers over the top of David's fence and hoisting herself over with practiced ease. It was undeniable. It was damning. It was utterly humiliating, but the final blow, the masterstroke of psychological warfare, was yet to come. The news anchor turned to her co-anchor. And in a bizarre twist, we're also getting reports from the tech world. A spokesperson for a company affiliated with Mr. Henderson has just announced they are fast-tracking a new product, a bioreactive safety dye called Aurastain, designed to help property owners harmlessly identify trespassers. They are calling this incident a successful, if unorthodox, field test and say it demonstrates the product's incredible effectiveness. Karen and Rick stared at the screen, their blue faces frozen in identical masks of slack-jawed disbelief. The camera cut back to the reporter on their street, who was now holding up her phone, reading the breaking tech news. He hadn't just defeated them. He hadn't just defended himself. He had turned their humiliation into a product. A brand. A marketing triumph. He was going to make a fortune off of her transgression. The blue staining their skin was no longer a symbol of his retribution, it was. The silence that followed the news report was heavier and more suffocating than the humid air trapped in the house. It was the silence of utter annihilation. On the screen, the pokey news anchor had moved on to a segment about a prize-winning pumpkin, the jarring tonal shift an insult to the smoldering crater that had just been made of their lives. Karen sank onto the couch, her body deflating as if her very bones had dissolved. The fight was gone. The rage, the indignation, the belief In her own victimhood, all of it had been systematically dismantled, exposed as fraudulent, and then repackaged as a commercial enterprise. She wasn't a victim. She wasn't even a villain. In David Henderson's world, she was just a data point in a successful field test. Her transgression hadn't just been punished, it had been monetised. The thought was so profoundly soul-crushing that she could only stare blankly at the wall, her blue skin a grotesque mockery of her inner emptiness. Rick, on the other hand, felt a cold, terrifying clarity crystallize in the pit of his stomach. The humiliation was no longer a vague social discomfort. It was a tangible, measurable threat. It was the deadline after his boss had hung up. It was the looming mortgage payment and the sudden, gut-wrenching insecurity of his entire professional existence. He looked at his wife, a blue statue of despair on their now-stained sofa, and felt a surge of something beyond anger. It was the cold fury of a man watching his ship sink because someone else had insisted on drilling holes in the hull to let the sunshine in. The second day dawned, a bright, cheerful Saturday that felt like a personal affront. The news vans were still there, a pack of patient vultures waiting for any sign of life. Their phones, which they'd silenced, pulsed with a constant, silent stream of digital venom and morbid curiosity. The outside world had become a minefield. The most potent poison, however, was seeping into the house itself. Leo, their older son, sat at the kitchen table, refusing to eat. He was staring at his own tablet, which he'd retrieved from his room. On the screen was a group chat with his friends from summer camp. Leo, are you really blue? My mom saw your mom on TV, she looked like a smurf, lol, send a pic. One of the kids had photoshopped Leo's face from last year's camp photo, turning his skin a familiar, vibrant blue. Below it, a dozen laughing emojis. Leo looked up at his father, his eyes swimming with a confused, adult-sized shame. They are laughing at me, he said, his voice small and broken. Why are they laughing? Rick felt a pang so sharp it nearly brought him to his knees. His children, his innocent, stupid, wonderful children, were now casualties in a war. They didn't understand, a war started by their mother's breathtaking arrogance. Next door, David Henderson was having a very different morning. He sat in his minimalist kitchen, sipping a perfectly extracted espresso, watching the same news report on his tablet. He felt no glee, no triumph. He felt the quiet satisfaction of a complex problem elegantly solved. The social media sentiment, which his own software was analyzing in real time, had shifted dramatically in his favor overnight. He was no longer the weird, reclusive neighbor. He was a tech visionary, a defender of property rights, a modern-day folk hero to anyone who'd ever had an annoying neighbor. His phone rang. It was the CEO of the parent company that funded his startup. David, the CEO boomed, his voice electric with excitement. Aura Stain. It's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. The board is ecstatic. We've had 3 venture capital firms call us this morning. This is bigger than the data compression algorithm. Forget beta testing, we are taking this to market. Now. Get on a plane. I want you in San Francisco on Monday. We are striking while the iron is hot. The irony was staggering. Rick's career was imploding, his conference in jeopardy. David was being summoned to the heart of the tech world, his future brighter than ever. His decisive, morally ambiguous action hadn't just been excused by the world, it had been handsomely rewarded. As he hung up, David glanced out his window. He saw the news vans. He saw the drawn curtains of the house next door. He saw the fishbowl he had created. For the first time, a flicker of something uncomfortable pricked at the edge of his composure. This had been about restoring order to his world, not demolishing theirs. The scale of the fallout was larger than his calculations had predicted. The collateral damage was messier. Back in the blue house, Rick knew he was out of options. The law wasn't on their side. Public opinion had convicted them. His career was on life support. There was only one move left. A move so humiliating, so utterly debasing, that it made his stomach clench. He had to surrender. Unconditionally. I'm going over there, he announced, his voice a dead monotone. Karen looked up from the couch, her eyes hollow. What? Rick, no. Don't. There's nothing else to do, Karen, he said, his voice devoid of heat, which was somehow worse than his yelling. You picked a fight with a king, and you brought a plastic fork. I'm going to beg. For you. For the boys. For whatever is left of our lives. He didn't wait for a reply. He walked to the front door, took a deep breath, and stepped outside. The moment he appeared, a blue man in a wrinkled polo shirt and yesterday's pants, the reporters swarmed. Cameras flashed. Microphones were thrust in his face. Mr. Miller, can you give us a comment? How are your children holding up? Is it true you're being sued by your employer? Rick ignored them all. He kept his eyes fixed on David's front door, his face a grim mask. He walked across his lawn, across the invisible property line that had started it all, and up the pristine walkway to David's house. Each step was an agony of humiliation, broadcast live to the entire city. He pressed the doorbell. After a moment, the door opened. David stood there, dressed in crisp linen, looking calm and rested. He looked at the wretched, blue man on his doorstep, at the media circus on the lawn, and his expression was unreadable. Mr. Miller, David said, his voice neutral, Can I come in? Rick asked, the words tasting like poison. David paused for a fraction of a second, then stepped back, allowing him entry. He closed the door, shutting out the world. They stood in the silent, cool foyer. Rick looked around at the pristine, orderly space. It was the home of a man in complete control. You've won, Rick began, his voice cracking. Okay. You win. You've destroyed my wife. You've terrified my children. I'm about to lose my job. You're a hero, and we're a punchline. Congratulations. Is it enough? David regarded him with a cool, analytical gaze. This was never about winning or losing. This was about an action and a consequence. Your wife committed an action. This is the consequence. It's simple physics. Physics. Rick choked out a laugh that was half a sob. Look at me. Look at what you've done to my family. To my kids. Is there any humanity in you? Can't. You just call it off. Put out another statement. Tell them you've made your point. Tell them to leave us alone. And what action would precipitate that reaction? David asked, his voice genuinely curious. What has changed? So far. All I've seen from your wife is denial and blame. The universe doesn't grant mercy without a preceding act of contrition. Rick stared at him, finally understanding. This wasn't about revenge for David. It was about a principle. It was about a debt being paid. And the debt, in his eyes, was still outstanding. What do you want? Rick whispered. I'll do anything. Money. Is that it? David almost smiled. Your money is of no interest to me. My company stock is projected to open up 15% on Monday morning, thanks to your wife. I'm not the one with a financial problem today. The statement was so cold, so brutal in its honesty, that Rick felt the last of his strength leave him. Then what? He pleaded. Just tell me. David was silent for a long moment, his gaze distant as if calculating a final, complex move. An apology, he said finally. A genuine, public, and unequivocal admission of wrongdoing. Rick stared, confused. I'm here. I'm apologizing. Not from you, David corrected him. From her. The one who climbed the fence. The one who started this. I want a written apology from Karen, posted on the same community Facebook group where this circus began. She will state that she knowingly and repeatedly trespassed. She will state that my response, while unorthodox, was a direct result of her illegal actions. She will apologize to me and to the neighborhood for the spectacle she created. It was a masterstroke of cruelty, wrapped in the language of reason. It wasn't a request for money or a pound of flesh. It was a demand for the one thing Karen Miller was psychologically incapable of giving, a public admission that she was wrong. When I see that post, David continued, his voice as sharp and final as a closing door, I will have my attorney issue a statement urging the media to respect your family's privacy and consider the matter closed. The news cycle will move on. But the post stays up. Permanently. Rick stumbled back, his mind reeling. He looked at David, at this man who had so thoroughly outmaneuvered them at every turn, and saw not a monster, but something far more terrifying. A man who operated by a code so rigid and unforgiving it left no room for human error. He walked out of the house, back into the glare of the cameras, and returned to the blue-tinted prison of his own home. He found Karen still on the couch, listless. He stood before her, the avatar of their shared ruin. "I spoke to him," he said, his voice hollow. "He's offered us a way out." A flicker of hope appeared in her eyes. "What is it?" Rick took a deep, shaky breath and told her the term.